Debbie Goodman is the Group CEO of Jackhammer, a global group of executive search, talent advisory, and leadership coaching companies. Debbie also coaches founders, CEOs, and co-founders globally. Debbie is a 2-time best-selling author and a host of the podcast On Work Revolution. She started her career as an award-winning contemporary choreographer and dancer while she was finishing her law degree. Debbie is originally from Cape Town, but is now based in Los Angeles. Thank you so much, Debbie, for giving the time and for waking up early in LA.
Very nice to be here.
For those that don't know, considering I've just said LA, where were you born? And do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I'm born in Cape Town. I lived there pretty much most of my life. And I do have one brother who's still in Cape Town and who fortunately I get to visit together with the rest of my family every 6 months because I come back frequently.
Yeah, well, we hope to see you next time you're here. So you are a mother. What
Yes.
has the journey of motherhood been like? And also, what has it taught you about living?
Sure, so many things. I have 2 daughters. They're now teenagers. And I know everybody goes, oh, teenagers. And actually, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
They're amazing kids. But every phase has its own joys and its own challenges. And everybody tells you, oh, it's going to move by so fast. And then it really does. And so you never know when this phase is going to end. As with life, we're going through phases and times and the roller coaster of what life presents. And my intention is always just to be as present as possible. It's not always easy because you never know when it's going to be the last time that you read a bedtime story or when it's going to be my 16-year-old's just started to drive.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, I don't do any schlepping anymore. And I thought I would love the day when that stopped. But actually, it's like, oh my goodness, I don't do any of that anymore. So be present and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, indeed. My mother also used to say that when we were younger. She used to say, make use of me, because when I'm gone, I will not be able to. Though I keep telling her that even from heaven, Mommy, you'll still be doing your job. What is the one core value that shaped the character you are, you think?
I'd say most probably my creativity, or just generally creativity and resourcefulness, the problem-solving nature of being an entrepreneur is that, first of all, I love being able to make something out of nothing.
Yeah.
It's a very creative pursuit. When one thinks of creativity as being something that's in the arts, but actually it's in life in general. You need the creativity and resourcefulness to keep digging out of the trench that you may find yourself in from time to time. So, yeah, I'd say that's a common trait through my life in all different circumstances.
Yeah, creativity. Well, we'll mention that. Considering you are a choreographer and a contemporary dancer, it has to be part of your DNA as well. Yeah. So being an African white female, how does that identity influence how you show up in the world?
Wow, that's a deep question, Dudu. And so, I grew up during apartheid. I saw the transition through democracy, and you just can't live through that and not have completely baked into you just the access and privilege on the one hand and the disempowerment and discrimination on the other. And you can't not see that. You can't not experience that. It's like, it's just totally baked into certainly who I am, being able to be aware of that. I also had I grew up in a very insular white community, but I had this incredible opportunity when I was a teenager. I started dancing with an activist dance company during the during the height of apartheid. Actually, Group Areas Act was like totally being entrenched, and I was dancing with Black, Indian, colored friends. They were my dance friends, and we would go and dance in the townships right during the state of emergency. I would go to, the beaches were segregated at the time, but I would go with my black friends and I would be the only white person on the beach.
The odd one
and
out.
I think just that, yeah. So I had this kind of eye-opening experience that was very different to the way I was being brought up. And I think just by the nature of that phase and that time in my life, it was a very formative time. Being an adolescent during this this crazy time. I'm inherently an activist. I'm a fighter. But the place I fight now is in the workplace. I fight for equity. I get to fight different kinds of battles. But if you ask me how it's informed me, I guess that's the common thread and how I live today.
Yeah, it has to be an important area because there's no way you can grow a company to the size you have without having that fighting spirit. It's an energy. There's a time we didn't hear your brand name, and then suddenly it was everywhere. So it definitely is working. So then this is just perfect. You are Group CEO of Jackhammer, a global group of executive search, talent advisory, leadership coaching companies. Why did you name it Jackhammer? Because actually, when I first heard it, I thought it was a male company. But anyway.
Aha, there's the point.
Yeah.
So when I was establishing my company for the first time, setting up the brand, I was working with a brand agency, and they came back to me with these super lame names that they had no punch, they had no energy. And I said to them, guys, that's not me. We've got to stand out, and I want something that's got some oomph. And they came back to me a couple of days later and they said, okay, we got it. And they said, this is the name, Jackhammer. And I was like, yes, you have got it. And for many reasons. First of all, you know what the Jackhammer tool is? It's that heavy power tool.
Yeah, it's something that I'm not used to.
Okay, well, me either, but nevertheless. So it's a digging tool. Yeah. And as a search company, we dig deep. We've got to dig deep, find the gems below the surface. So there was that sort of metaphor going on. But also, just as you said, many professional services firms are male-founded, male-run, male-dominated. And I was at the time in my early 30s, and I was really finding that I was starting to, butt my head against the old boys club. And so as a bit of a poke at that, I decided to name the company with a very masculine sounding name. And then there's still times when I'll walk into a room and people will be expecting to see the male founder, or they'll ask where Jack is. And I was like, well, there she is.
Perfect. Yes. It's an amazing brand. I was introduced to it by Kim Hawk, who invited me to a function, and I did enjoy it much. Do you believe you know the reason you were born, and how did you arrive at that knowledge and understanding?
So this is, I think I certainly feel very lucky in that I knew what I was meant to do here on earth the day I walked into my very first dance class. I was about 6 years old, and I arrived at this dance class, and all of a sudden it was like I knew I was home. Mm-hmm. That's what I was meant to do with my life. And it's fortunately something that I did pursue professionally for a number of years into my late 20s, until I decided to retire, because you retire early as a dancer. And then very fortunately, something that I've been able to reconnect with now in my 50s, I've been able to take up competitive ballroom dancing, which you can do at sort of any sort of stage and age in life. There's this whole competitive league in the US. So it's been something that has just been my passion and my love, and the thing that I feel most at home, and my spirit is most alive when I'm performing or competing. So yeah, probably I will. I certainly hope I'll dance till the day I die. Dance to my grave.
I shall think you will. That's going to happen for sure. Now that you're no longer full-time in South Africa, what is distinctive about the spirit of South Africans? I know we're going to be generalizing here, but that you miss since you've relocated from Cape Town. Can you share an example of it in action?
Yeah, I've never felt more South African than since I've been living abroad. And there's so much that I miss. I come back to Cape Town every 6 months. When I'm back in LA, I am so homesick. But there's something about this, the warm-hearted, open friendliness of people, regardless of race and color and all the things, that I really miss so much. Walking on the promenade, you'll have people like just making eye contact, saying hello. And then the other thing is, there's this moment when I arrive at passport control in South Africa, and the ladies or the men there, everybody's so friendly. They're very different when you're at passport control at JFK. You don't want to look too sideways, otherwise you're worried you're going to get taken off to the little room. So those are just two sort of instant examples of how much that just warmth that I feel the moment I land.
Yeah. I always say the banter across races. I love that. I seem to banter a lot with white males, when I'm in a queue or anything. So it's always the funniest thing.
Right.
Find something to humor about. And then you think, gosh, yeah, I love my country,
Me too.
So reporting to someone and abiding by their rules were not your strongest qualities, which inspired your foray into entrepreneurship after working for a recruitment company where you started as a database manager. How did that self-belief that you could do better influence the leader you have become?
Sure. First of all, I was a terrible employee. I mostly felt that I must have been impossible to manage, because I always wanted my ideas to be the ones that would work. But I learned a lot about what not to do as a manager and a leader. I never wanted people to come to work with a bit of a pit in their stomach, feeling nervous or anxious, to be walking into an environment that was unpleasant, where they felt reprimanded all the time. So I knew it informed what I didn't want to do. What I still needed to learn is, what type of leader did I want to become? And I did a lot of studying, reading books, getting inspiration from wherever I could, so that I could start to mold an idea of what does great leadership look like for me in my authentic style. And I made a ton of mistakes, and still do. But leadership is really another space for creativity. You're constantly learning, you're constantly experimenting and trying new things, and you're not necessarily one way all the time, or one way to every person in your team. Mm-hmm. You constantly got to be adapting and shifting and changing, and recognizing how individuals are how to optimize and motivate. And mostly, I really want people to feel that they're loving their work life as much as possible. I want to have an amazing workplace for people to be as much as possible. Granted, all of our jobs, some part of it is not going to be so lekker, but that's my my hope as a leader, that I can really help to cultivate that.
Yeah, because I think when the book, is it Living Room Leader?
Yes.
I think did you touch on the toxic environments and things like that?
I've spoken quite a bit on sort of toxic workplace.
Yeah.
I see people who leave or are fired or resign, and they really are bearing the scars of a toxic work environment, and it can be quite long lasting and as traumatic as any other kind of emotionally abusive situation. And so it's something that I'm very aware of and alert to, and I find it it can really scar people for a long time. So something that I want to make people more aware of so that they can understand what is toxic versus just something that's, a manager who is pointing out when you're not doing a great job.
Yeah.
What is, what is harmful versus what is just, not necessarily harmful, but not necessarily the perfect fit for you. So I've spent quite a bit of time on webinars and podcasts, etc., talking about it because in the hope that both managers, leaders, and individuals will be able to recognize and then do something about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, because it's an important role to play, especially from an executive search perspective, considering you do help place those leaders so that they're not creating those toxic environments. But the one thing that we do know, naivete and arrogance can be strengths in entrepreneurs to tackle the unknown. In hindsight, what do you wish you had learned before beginning this journey that you're on as an entrepreneur?
So naivety, arrogance, and impatience are probably the third in the triad of traits.
Yeah.
And I would say that things always take longer than you think. That's probably the thing that trips me up the most is I think of something, I put a strategy together, then I want to execute and I want to see the results. And they often, almost always, take longer than you think. Business plans essentially, when you put something on the piece of paper, it's hopes and dreams.
Yes.
It also seldom materializes in exactly the way that you envisage. And you're going to have to adapt and change and, adjust really quickly.
Yeah.
There are going to be more detours than you can possibly imagine. So it's definitely not a glamorous road, that is for sure. But if you're up for the excitement and you can withstand the many twists and turns, then I'd say go for it.
Yeah, we're just talking about this today. There's a model, a stylist, who wants upfront payment before coming to see you. So I said, well, there is a cost of doing business. But if she's found a model where we pay upfront before even seeing the person, gosh, she's got a great business. We would all love that, Mm-hmm. But business is amazing in terms of the different models you can come up with. So during the first grips of COVID-19 and the hard lockdown in South Africa, your executive search firm business lost about 75% of business volume and revenue in the first month. How did you manage the operational and staff costs? And did you have the 6-month operational budget buffer that we always talk about?
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, when with the shock of what was happening in the world, and with everybody trying to figure out who was going to be working at home and who was going to still be in all that chaos, nobody was paying any attention to hiring. So our business came pretty much to a standstill quite rapidly, which was quite scary. Fortunately, I've always made it. I've always had cash flow. So it's one of the things that I learned very early on was in a business like ours is to make sure that there's a buffer because we're project-based, we don't have an annuity income, and you just want to make sure that even if things get a little rocky from time to time, there's enough cash to see you through. So that was, fortunately, this was one of those moments when I was very grateful that I'd been disciplined with that. But we got very lean, as many companies did. And until business started to pick up again, the one thing that I did not want to do, I did not want to retrench anybody.
Yeah.
But we were facing some pretty severe, a bit of a balancing act to do. And so I spoke to every single person in the team and I said, listen, guys, we've got a choice to make here. Each one of you can take a small salary sacrifice for a period. And that means that we can save everybody. We don't have to retrench anyone. Alternatively, we're possibly going to need to retrench 1 or 2 people. And everyone in the team said, it's okay, let's take the small salary sacrifice. And so the whole team just we bound together. And then, within a relatively short period of time, maybe 6 months or so, 6 to 9 months, I was able to sort of repay the shortfall. Yeah. But I was super grateful that everybody had just stood together And it was amazing for our team and for our culture and for morale. And soon enough, things swung back to normal.
Yeah, I'm sure it made you a stronger culture after that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What has been the most challenging lesson about starting a business in a foreign country, and how did you navigate these difficulties?
You know, our business, professional services, is a very relationship-driven business. You build relationships slowly over time, and then you have this, accumulated network. And the relocating to the US, although the markets are huge, I had very few relationships. And so that was, in South Africa, I'm like one phone call away from pretty much anybody that I need to call. In the US, starting from scratch. And so, 20-something years into having an established business in South Africa, to literally start from relationship one was pretty hardcore. And then the markets are massive here. They are overwhelmingly big and very competitive. And so trying to navigate through that, where do you niche? Where do you build? And then just doubling down on building relationships, which take time. And so there have been many challenges, and there's still ongoing challenges, but fortunately, I can say that my network has expanded exponentially over the years, thankfully. So we're on our way.
As an executive search firm operating on 2 continents, how do the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging influence how you operate? Do you lead clients to take the initiative, or are you passively responding to their stated requirements?
So a lot of our work in South Africa from, the late 90s was focused on the transformation agenda. So that has been a substantial portion of the executive search leadership appointments that we've made over the last 20-something years. Companies call us when they need to make a senior leadership appointment. Their network is not robust enough, or they need to just conduct a proper, rigorous process, and it's a diversity appointment. So that has been a fundamental, large part of our organization for more than 2 decades. What I was surprised about was when I relocated to the US, everybody was talking about diversity and Black Lives Matter and all the things, but there's no real official policy in how to go about that when it comes to hiring.
Yeah.
And every state has got its own regulations, and companies are afraid of being sued for reverse discrimination. So companies and boards and leaders, they do want to diversify their leadership teams. They realize it's good for so many reasons, but the practicalities of it are very, very different. And so I was surprised to discover that actually they're way behind when it comes to diversity hiring policies than we are in South Africa, where it's baked into our labor law.
Yeah, it is amazing in how many areas we're actually leading, and we undermine ourselves so much.
Many.
Yeah, because
yes.
We're such a small, we do punch above our weight in many ways.
Yes, indeed.
So when Elon Musk says DEI is just another word for racism, shame on anyone who uses it, what is your view on his opinion?
So Elon Musk has a lot of very provocative things to say about many things. Listen, he's a super smart guy. He's an incredible visionary, but I do not rate him on people skills. And when he says something like shame, I'll say shame on you. So I wouldn't take that with too much credence at all. I know he has got a lot of followers, which is unfortunate when he says something like that. But yeah, let him stick to thinking up big dreams.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. So on your website, there is a quote that from a client. It says, Jack Hammer is the most courageous executive search firm I've ever had the pleasure of working with. Can you share maybe just one tip? I don't want to take too much of your time in terms of the art and science of having a difficult conversation with a client that is not welcoming of a global cultural changes that are taking place. So you have an excellent candidate, and yet it does not fit whatever the client wants, and you trying to push that conversation. How do you handle that?
You know, we're still constantly tackling unconscious bias, sometimes even conscious bias. Our clients start out with a wish list, a list of criteria that they want to have met, and that could be skills, experience, and other diversity requirements. And the science part of the work is that we will ensure that, for the most part, the candidates that we introduce to them, tick as many of those boxes as possible. But the art of it is people are human, and you come across, and we all come across amazing humans, amazing, talented people who have done incredible things in their work lives and who we know are going to be an asset to an organization. And they may not necessarily tick as many of the boxes as our clients want. And so in those instances in particular, it's about making those introductions that we're trying to have our client just trust the fact that we've spoken to hundreds of candidates for any role. The people who stand out, we really believe that they should have the benefit of at least having a meeting. And so it's sometimes a little bit of a negotiation and a little bit of arm twisting. Almost always, our clients are so grateful that we pushed hard for that to happen.
Mm-hmm. So the courage part is really true. Now that you're also competing with technological developments, must be a lot of creativity required from you, even in that sense. How are your businesses adapting to these developments?
Yeah, so the ability of companies to engage with candidates out there directly without using an intermediary like ourselves, an agency, that ability to access people directly has been increasing over many years. And many big companies these days all over the world, when they are going through a high growth phase, or they're just a big enough company that they're doing enough hiring, they're going to have their own internal talent acquisition resources. And that may mean that they need to use executive search firms like ours a lot less. Now, this has been gradually happening, and I think it's increasing, particularly with, in the US, certainly I'm seeing companies starting to experiment with AI to speed up the process, et cetera, et cetera. Nevertheless, there are always times when organizations will still need to use a high quality, high touch firm like ours. And those instances are internal talent acquisition is just overloaded. They haven't got enough time. Or the role is a very senior role and the internal team doesn't necessarily have the experience. Or it's a confidential search. Or they're needing to approach people from their competitors. Somebody at a competitor is not going to respond necessarily to your call or give you completely honest information. Where the company maybe hasn't got the greatest market brand and they need an intermediary to actually promote their brand. They need to hire in a new market. We do a ton of work in the rest of Africa. And so we see many South African companies that are expanding, global companies that are expanding into African markets. And we've got the know-how and the network on the ground. And so, we will fill a need where a company doesn't have the right internal resources to do that direct connection, or where they really do need an expert for those circumstances that I mentioned. So we're okay. The world still needs us, but differently than it may have been, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah. So it's not always that when technology advances, businesses are destroyed. We just work together and we adapt.
Yeah, it's, the thing is that we're there to solve a pain point. If a company is not having a problem to hire candidates, they don't need us. If they are having a problem, and whatever that problem necessarily is, then we can come in and support. So yeah, it's just they're different pain points now than they were maybe 5 years ago.
So you authored the book, The Living Room Leader. leadership lessons for a hybrid future. What is the core premise of the book?
So in the early days of COVID, I was just catching up and checking in with all of my clients all over the world, from Singapore and India, Nigeria, South Africa, US, just Europe, everywhere, just to see how they were doing. And I was finding myself getting really inspired by some of the strategies that they were deploying in order to manage differently, lead differently, get their teams who were now distributed for the first time. Work from home was a new thing, back in 2020 for many companies. And I started recording all of these interviews and realized that there was this new era of the work world that was going to unfold into the future. And I wasn't sure what that future looked like, but I wanted to be able to share some of these ideas. And I knew I had a window of time to compile, document, compile, and then get the book out, while people were still hungry for ideas on how to lead in this new era. And so it was a pretty quick turnaround. I think the book is dated now, but nevertheless, it fulfilled its purpose. I started writing it in sort of mid-2020 and published by mid-2021. I was hopeful that some of the new ways of leading would sustain into the future, because I think there were many advantages that arose out of that period, and some have.
I think they will still stay because it's become the way of working. It came out of a crisis, but a lot of companies have adopted it as the new way. So it's a book that one can still gain a lot of value from.
If you think about it, the idea that work environments would be everybody works together in the same place 5 days a week from 8 to 5, that's kind of like a preposterous idea nowadays. That happens very rarely, in fact. And it's in a really short space of time that transition, that transformation, that shift in the working world has happened, where that idea that was pretty steadfast, and this is the way we work, has been completely disrupted.
Yeah. And many more disruptions still to come. In the US, there was this great resignation trend that happened. In South Africa, I think you've said that we've experienced more the great grievance. Can you expand on that?
So what was happening in the US during, after the very early days of COVID was all of a sudden there was a lot of financial stimulus in all markets. And as a result, there was this hiring frenzy. There was a lot of growth happening. Together with people who there was a stimulus in terms of unemployment, money that was going to individuals, where minimum wage workers, for example, was actually better for them to just stay home and collect unemployment than actually go to work. So regardless of whether you were in tech or whether you were a frontline worker in any industry, there was a greater demand for people to fill jobs than ever before. And if people weren't happy, there would be another offer on the table. They would resign and walk to the next good opportunity at a better salary and hopefully a better work environment. Or they would just take some time out and live off their savings or their unemployment. So there was this ability, this employee power at the time where they could just literally say, I'm done here, or leave. And this was happening in droves.
Wow.
We had a very different situation in South Africa. There wasn't the financial stimulus. There wasn't this, rush of hiring. And so people would be unhappy, but they'd stay. And that grievance mentality is what what we're referring to, in that you'd have unhappy people staying, which is, equally bad.
Yeah. Because then they make the entire environment toxic anyway.
Yeah.
It is amazing that sometimes, especially when we get to generational research, we always try and generalize. And I think what you just demonstrated with these two examples, that we kind of have to be careful that what's happening in the US is not always what's happening in other parts of the world. So we kind of have to really be aware of what's going on in your own context.
definitely contextualize all the time.
Yeah. So as a South African, even though you're living in the US, what keeps you awake at night at present, if anything at all?
I spend the first half of every day of my day as if I was in South Africa. I'm on the West Coast, right? So the big time zone difference. So I start my day around about 5 a.m. I'm on email and calls with my clients, with my team. And so I know the load shedding schedule. I'm still very involved in the day-to-day of South Africa, and I'm very invested in the success of the country and the people. And I worry about all the same things that everybody in South Africa is worried about: political issues, socioeconomic issues, consumer issues, crime, joblessness, healthcare, education. I still worry about all of it. And yes, it may seem like, I've got the luxury of living in a place where the lights stay on, but actually not always. Lights go out here too. And then people here are just like, they don't know how to handle it.
Yeah. We've learned to diarize it into our schedule.
Yes.
But
yes,
I must say, it's been so good not to have any load shedding in the last few months. So,
right. Amazing.
Yeah, so very good, very good. I miss those days where we didn't have any blood pressure because we had load shedding. Yeah. I was in Zambia just recently, and they're also going through a load shedding. So I think it's a challenge globally. I think Germany was also investigating at some point how South Africa does it. So we're going to become a case study for a lot of countries.
Yes.
What is the one decision you wish you never made in life, and why?
In terms of big decisions, big life decisions, I've had many disappointments. I've had many things that didn't work out the way I'd hoped. But I don't think that they were bad decisions. They were, things that imploded or it didn't work out. But I've learned from them, and I certainly don't regret any of the decisions in the first place. Maybe I had pain, maybe I had grief, anxiety, etc. But there were also many good things along the way. So I always, feel that it's part of the journey. So I've bought pairs of shoes that I never wore. So those were bad decisions.
Oh gosh!
I wore them once. I was like, "What was I thinking?"
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Can't walk in these things. Yeah,
yeah, I know the feeling. What book would you recommend to our audience, and why?
I read a lot of nonfiction. And one that I recommend, particularly to women, but actually to all leaders, all people in the workplace, it's a book called If You Don't Do Politics, Politics Will Do You.
Oh, okay.
And it's written by Niven Postma, who's a South African organizational consultant.
Yeah,
and
I know Niven,
I recommend this all the time because politics, we have that in all organizations of all sizes, and it's needed. Politics are needed in order for things to run effectively. And we always think about politics as something that is very negative and can be disadvantageous. But understanding what those dynamics are and learning how to navigate well is part of what one needs to do in the working world. And so anyway, that's a book I highly recommend. And then another real favorite of mine is a book called The Art of Possibility by Benjamin Zander. And that's got just some classic leadership lessons. He was, I don't know if he still is, a conductor with the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. And maybe because he's also an artist and then had these ideas for the business world that I really connected with that. And I love that book. I've took many lessons from that.
It looks like there's a book in you in terms of how you can translate the lessons of dance into ordinary life and wisdom that we can learn. Yeah, I think so. Since you're back into your competitive dancing, I think a book is coming out. I would love to chat to you forever, but I know we need to close off now. To end our conversation, what final wisdom would you like to share with our audience?
Sure. Just say yes to opportunities and then put 100% into it. Whether it's personal or professional, you never know where these will lead. But don't do it half. If you do something half, it can't really materialize in anything substantial. And then, like, don't be scared of aiming big. I think a lot of people don't put those big goals because they're afraid of the disappointment if they don't reach them. And my hope is that people will just aim. If you get halfway to that big goal, that's amazing. There's no shame in not achieving a big goal. But rather than having small, tiny, or no goals, I would be much happier to aim big and maybe get partway there. And I'd say, lastly, just find your passion somewhere. It doesn't have to be in work. Just find some passion and spend some time doing what you love, even if it's not in the professional domain, because it spills over into everything. In one area of your life and your brain and your body is lighting up, it's going to light up the rest of you too. And that's going to be magnetic. And that's going to really filter into all areas of your life. And then you just have one life. So, go for it.
Live it.
Make it meaningful.
Make it count.
Live it. Yes.
Yay. Thank you so much, Debbie. Really, I am so excited that you said yes. I was taking a chance.
My pleasure. And this was the perfect weekend. If you'd asked me in the next 4 weekends, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yay, the universe, energy. I believe in energy.
Connected us.
Thank you so much. Have an awesome day. And I hope I will see you when you're next in Cape Town.
Okay, that'll be amazing. Thanks, Dudu.
There we are, folks. Hope you have enjoyed this wisdom as I have. Until next time, on the next episode of Wisdom Personified Conversations with Dudu Msomi. Thank you for making time for this episode of Wisdom Personified Conversations with Dudu Msomi. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Click on the bell notification to be informed when our next episode is available. Wisdom Personified Conversations with Dudu Msomi is also now available on Facebook Watch, Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. Enjoy the wisdom journey.